Back with another Talk About Nothing. My guest this month is the best-selling author of Bloody Rose and Kings of the Wild and maybe the upcoming Outlaw Empire. This is Nicholas Eames from the Great White North. Sir, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me. As you can see, I'm repping some Bloody Rose merch. I found this shirt. I was doing some major closet reorganization today and found this shirt in there. I've never actually worn it because it's pretty awful to wear your own shit. But
No, not at all. I mean, I have a coffee mug that says Mike's Book Reviews on it. And
well,
make
that's
sure
coffee mug's a bit more understated. Yeah.
But so last time we talked, we actually were actually to talk about your book, and the whole time that we were there, I just like we kept wanting to talk about meatloaf and video games and all these other fun things. I was like, we need to get back together eventually and just have a nice little talk about nothing. That's before I actually created this segment. I said this would be a great idea, so I'm glad that you agreed to come on here and talk with me. Now, before we get too thick into it here, if I don't ask about Outlaw Empire, people can get mad. So let's just get that one out of the way. Do you have any kind of update for us?
Well, the update is that I now live with my girlfriend who recently finished her PhD and so knows what it's like to write while living in agony and being stressed out all the time. And so she has kind of been my coach recently and has got me on back to a strict diet of 500 words a day during the weekdays, which I usually have hit in the last few weeks. So I've honestly written more in the last month than I wrote in the last year. So it's coming along. The plot is all there. It's just a matter of not restarting the book, which I've done about 20 times.
Yeah, I think I talked to Sebastian de Castell, and he was telling me that he basically just had to restart his Greatcoats book over.
Oh, really?
Wow, that's painful. I mean, that was a year ago. I mean, for all I know, he's almost done with it by now. But yeah.
I had to do it with Bloody Rose. I changed it. I changed the main character halfway through the book, and so I had to go back and rewrite it. And then I changed just even the first 3 chapters. I changed her origin story about 3/4 of the way through, and that changed who she was as a person. So I had to go back, and I kept all the plot points, but I rewrote every single scene because it changed everything. So I think that was kind of in my head writing this 3rd book. I kept being like, oh no, this isn't perfect, go back. It's tough. I've definitely had a rough time doing it, but hopefully I'm on the right track now. And every time I tell an editor or my old agent what's going on, they want to know what the actual plot of the book is, and they love it. So hopefully I can just write a book worthy of it.
Yeah, great. So I believe that I've heard that you're going to have some non-humans in the band this time. Is that correct?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Hope it's an owl bear.
If only. If only. No, the only one that I can talk about is, I mean, the cover has been done for 3 years. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to show it because I can't. It's like a prize when I finish the book. I'm allowed to show it, and it's just so goddamn awesome. But yeah, there's a character in the very first book in Kings of the Wild. They go to this kobold's house so Gabe can get money to get Galen out of prison. And the kobold's got these 3 kids, or these 4 kids, and one of them has a nest made of knives and weapons that he's kind of thrown together. And Gabriel makes an offhand comment that goes, "That's Short Knife. He's a little off," or something like that. And Short Knife is one of the main characters of the final.
Yeah, so other people that say, "Oh, they're standalone books." Not really. I mean, they're just. I look at them kind of like those middle books in the first law. Is that their connections are kind of there. They're just not all exactly the same characters. Not like a continuation of where that book ended, the next one starts.
Exactly. You can always read them out of order. I get letters to people all the time that started with Bloody Rose, and I think that's kind of a cool way to do it because boy, oh boy, would it make Kings of the Wild more poignant knowing kind of what happens in Bloody Rose. Right. And then the 3rd book takes place 20 years after the first book. So, you're going to see all those same characters from books 1 and books 2. But I think it'll be a nice, great conclusion for everyone that's read the series. But also, hopefully, if someone could just read it, and it'll be an awesome story as it is.
Well, not a surprise here, but people in the comments really do like the book. So there we go.
Awesome.
Very happy
I
here.
see that comment. Thanks, Benjamin.
Anybody's going to read it because of me. That's awesome. Because I mean, just pay it forward here because there she is. Madison is the one who actually really nonstop to read this book when it came out.
Yeah.
So
that's $5 I ever spent. Brad. Canadian dollars too. So that's $250.
All right, so I want to make sure I brought up the book before we really got going, because I knew that's what all the comments were going to be. When's Outlaw Empire coming out? So
All right,
I know as an author, that's got to be your most favorite question to field. But hey, I say take your time and get it right. You know, I mean, don't George R. Martin, take your time, but take your time and get it right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel it's important to be kind of upfront and open and honest about, you know, if you're having a hard time. I feel if authors, you know, can just come out and say, "Oh, I'm having a hard time writing it." Like you look at someone like Scott Lynch. People don't hound him. Every tweet he makes isn't like hounded about, you know, when's he's going to come out.
Why
with
aren't you writing? Yeah,
yeah. Unlike, you know, some other people. So it's just as long as you're open and honest about, you know, if you're having issues. And I think with goddamn the last couple of years, like, you know, try doing anything creative if you're an empathetic person. It can be difficult. Obviously, some people pull it off amazingly, and some people don't.
What are some books similar to Kings of the Wyld? I think like some good rock biographies, like The Dirt by Motley Crue, maybe.
Yeah. There's a book I read while I was writing it called like Everything You Want Is on the Bus or something like that, and it was kind of a rock thing. But if you're looking for fantasy books similar to Kings of the Wyld, there's a book called The Black Tongue Thief that came out within the last couple of years.
Yeah,
got the same editor. Yeah. And oh my God, I love that book so much.
I'm reading him for the first time in October for my scary books. I'm doing his Between Two Fires, but I do actually own Black Tongue Thief. And so if I really like Between Two Fires, which I'm sure I will from what I've heard about it. Because I feel like that's a subgenre that isn't tackled enough, like a medieval horror. I think that's something that's just I didn't know I needed until I discovered it. Now I'm like, why isn't there more of this?
It's practically fantasy. Yeah, I recently audiobooked that, and it was great. It was great.
Oh, outstanding.
I think you're gonna like it. So. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got a couple of things I want to ask you about. First up, Guy Gabriel Kay. Last time we talked, you told me this was your favorite author of all time, correct?
Yes, he remains. Okay. He remains so.
I talked to Jake Bishop, another booktuber, and he just could not stop recommending Guy Gabriel Kay to me. But I kept being like, "Yes, but where should I start?" And he really couldn't give me an answer.
Okay.
So if I'm asking you, where should I start? Being a big fantasy, horror, and sci-fi kind of guy, I'm sure he's got something that's going to kind of fit that bill. What would you say is a great place to begin with Guy Gabriel Kay, if someone who's a really big fantasy fan?
Well, there's a few entryways into it. I think the best, what most people would recommend, is Taigana, which is his most popular book. When he first started writing, before he even wrote a book, he went to England and helped Christopher Tolkien compile the Silmarillion.
Oh, no kidding.
So that was kind of his, like, literally he's the two guys working on it. He was one of them. And so his first series is a trilogy that is such an homage to Tolkien. It's ridiculous. It's the first Guy Gabriel Kay book I ever read. When I was in high school, I had a book project due, you know, the next day, and I was like, okay, I need a Canadian book. I went, picked a spine, pulled it out. It was book 3 of a series, and I obviously should never start with book 3 of a series. And I started reading it. It was about people from the University of Toronto taken to a fantasy world, and I thought, this is the stupidest thing I've ever read. And then like King Arthur was in it, and I'm like, this is getting dumber every page. And then cut to a day later, and I was bawling my fucking eyes out.
No
I never cried at a book in my life. I was 17 years old or 16 years old or something like that. Never cried a book in my life, and I was just weeping and weeping and weeping. It was so sad. That was book 3 of the Fionnevar Tapestry.
Okay, Fionnevar. Okay.
So that's like, if you just took a bunch of university students named like Paul and Kim and then put them in Lord of the Rings, that's the book. And somehow it's just so beautifully written that it's good. But I'm talking, it is like, it's quote unquote elves that go to the west, like everything is the same. Dark Lord, you name it. And yet it doesn't, the quote on the cover of the book, at least the edition I've got, says, this is the only fantasy work I know which is not pale in comparison to the Lord of the Rings, which is, you know, it is true. It's absolutely fucking phenomenal book if you've got, you know, if you're in the headspace to read it. That said, then he wrote another like pure fantasy book, which is Taigana, his first standalone. It's got some elements of like Italian peninsula, Russian, Imperial Russia kind of stuff in it, but it's pure fantasy. And that's a great place to start, I think. It's a one-off. It's a huge book, but it's really beautiful. However, my personal favorite, there's one called The Lions of Al-Rasan, which takes place. That was I think his first book that took place in the world where he now writes all his books, which is like it's a fake Earth basically. And that one is about the Spanish Peninsula and like Moorish Spain and the fall of the Reconquista with the Christians coming in and taking over the Moorish Empire. And it is just that the ending of that book is just heart-wrenching. And I reread very few books in life, but I've reread that 3 times and I've started crying earlier in the book every single time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's quite the emotional writer.
Oh, I've never not cried at one of his books,
Really?
ever.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't cry at that many books, but I mean, I cried a lot of like commercials and stuff like that. But books, he's just beautifully. Every book is beautifully written, and his earlier stuff's a bit more raw and exciting, and his later stuff's a bit more kind of measured and slow and deliberate. So if you're looking to get into it, depending what you're in the mood for, his earlier stuff is more, appeals to more fantasy fans, where once you get into him, you're going to love everything he's ever written. So,
well, I do a thing every year where it's, because it seems like every series I pick up, it's like book 1 of 9, and like, are standalones dead? Why can't we get more standalones? It's like a unicorn when you find one. So everyone, every single year is like, GGK, you got to do some GGK. And I'm like, yeah, but which one? Because for everyone who says that Tagana is great, you'll find another person that says it is horrendous. So I don't know. It's like the only one that I ever get recommended is Tagana.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you don't want that, I mean, Lions of Al-Rasan is a great one. It's like borderline historical fiction because there's no like magic. All his later books, if it didn't, whatever the people at the time believed, that would be in the book. So the books about the Byzantine Empire, people believe that there were spirits in the streets. There's spirits in the streets. He wrote one about the Tang Dynasty China. There's fox spirits because people believed in the time that there were fox spirits. So those things exist, but there's no straight up like wizards and stuff like that. But yeah, Lions of Al-Rasan then, because if someone hates that book, they just
don't like books.
Hate themselves. They hate themselves. Yeah. Or they're not old enough. I mean, to be honest, when I read that book, I put it down. I read the first few pages. It was about this doctor she was in a marketplace. She was looking at urine flasks, and I gave the book back to my friend, and I'm like, not for me. I'm going to go read this book about a dark elf that has 2 scimitars and a Black Panther beside him. Yeah, I was just, I'm at that time in my life, and that was the stupidest thing I have ever done to this day. And I've done some stupid stuff.
Well, see, I just started reading Triss, and I'm like,
yeah. I mean, I devoured all those books, but then I went back and read God Gave Her Okay. And I mean, he's the reason I became a writer in the first place. It was a very specific page of one of his books that I finished the page and thought, if I can write something ever that affects me the way this is, or affects anyone, the way this has affected me, then that would be a life worth living. And that's literally when I decided to be a writer.
Wow.
Is a very specific page in one of his books.
So. Yeah, see, I hear things like that, and I say, I got to read this guy. I mean, it's the same thing as like Robert McCammon was an author. Everybody always recommends to me because they're like, "Oh, you love Stephen King, you'll love Robert McCammon." I'm like, "Yeah, but I hear that so much," and then I read the author, and it's not. That one's actually turned out to be true. So I'm afraid now if I read GGK, I'm going to be like addicted, and I'm going to have to like absorb everything he's written. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, he hasn't written that much. He usually takes a good 3 years at least to put a book out. And yeah, they're just, I mean, like I've heard you talk before about whether or not you're not like a big prose guy, or you can be, but I am a big prose person. And to me, there's no one like him.
I mean, I'm a character guy. I don't mind great writing. Like Chris Verrocchio, I think he's a modern author. I think he's just a beautiful writer.
Yeah.
And it's the thing is like, I'm not that person who will say, oh, the story wasn't that good, and I don't really like the characters, but the writing's so beautiful. I love the book. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
But if it is like beautiful, right? Like reading Robin Hobb, I'm like, wow, her writing is like incredible. I can't believe how beautiful her writing style is. It was never anything that anyone ever sold to me was like that she was a beautiful writer. It was always, oh, she's such a great character writer. She's gonna make you cry. That was what I was always told. So I notice it when it's there. It's not. To me, I'll take great characters and okay prose over beautiful prose and characters that I don't care about. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got nothing bad to say about Robin Hobb, although I did read Robin Hobb after I got published, actually, because I went to England and everyone was just like, Robin Hobb, like they worship her like a god over there, in case you didn't know. It's like it goes the Queen and then Robin Hobb.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And I think I'd heard her described, put in the same category as Guy Gabriel Kay, and ultimately, and not to disparage her at all, but it's not the same. stuff, but she's not trying to be. She's trying to tell a different kind of story that goes into the nitty gritty of people's lives, whereas Guy Gabriel Kay necessarily isn't. And the only person I can think of who, at least that I've read personally, that writes fantasy writers, that's the kind of the prose wise as good or better than Guy Gabriel Kay is R. Scott. I call him Baker, but I prefer to say Baker. Yeah, can't write a coherent story to save his fucking life. I mean, I love those books. Like you said, I love those books so much. I love them, and I never will ever recommend them to anyone because they're nonsensical, and yet they are exquisitely well written, like the best paragraph for paragraph writing that exists. And yet, what is happening? I don't know.
Oh man, I didn't know you were talking about Malazan today. Here's the thing: is some people on my Discord,
nothing compared to these. As
really,
far as
there's some people on my Discord that dropped out of the Malazan read along and they started doing the was it Aspect Emperor and Prince of Nothing. They loved it. But now, the more and more they talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, it's so philosophical. I'm like, I'm done.
It is philosophical.
Malazan, I need a break from philosophy. Yeah.
And before a Malazan fan murders me, like Malazan complexity wise is a lot more complex than it, obviously. But the style of writing, like, I mean, and in 10 books of Malazan, there was one time where I was like, I read this sentence and I was like, oh my, like plot wise, yes, tons of crazy stuff. But only one time did I read a sentence and go, holy shit, that was a beautifully constructed sentence. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. It was so good. But in the Aspect Emperor ones, it's like every paragraph is just stupid, and yet sometimes, like for chapters at a time, you don't know where the fuck you are. You don't know if you're in a room. You don't know anything that's happening. It is bizarre. Wow. It is bizarre. But I if you like prose, God, they're so good.
I don't know. I mean, that's one of the reasons I keep putting off Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, because everybody just says like, oh yeah, you have no idea what's going on like ever, and I'm like,
yeah.
I've
got that book. Yeah.
So
they've all got their strengths. They've all got their weaknesses too. I mean, people could say Guy Gabriel Kay is boring, and if someone says that, I'm not going to be like bite their head off, because sure, he could definitely be seen as boring by a lot of people. So
Bryce, Michael Crichton adaptation that was terrible was Timeline, and adaptation I'd like to see them try again is Timeline, because that's an incredible book. So I would just pretend it didn't happen. Do like they did with the Hulk and just pretend it didn't happen and just try again. That would be something I think that at this point they've adapted everything by Crichton. I think maybe they could start doing some more trying again, like they're trying to do with Stephen King. They're starting to try to just try again, and half the time they're still not any better. But
Or what about the Jurassic Park book?
I mean, that movie was okay, I guess. I mean, oh man, God, I went and saw that newest Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Michael Crichton wasn't just rolling around in his grave. He was freaking spinning in his grave. Oh my God, that was so bad. My kids got up about 50 minutes into it and just walked away.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I remember I watched the trailer and I thought, holy shit, maybe they've got it. And they had a guy riding on like one of those little scooters that got his bitten on by a T-Rex. I'm like, all right, this is 100% movie so far.
Absurd, dude. It's absurd. So, it's one of those like you thought. I was hoping they would do like the Cobra Kai thing. They got the originals back. They can kind of do the next generation thing and do it really well. No, they Star Wars it. They Star Wars it. Really bad. Apparently, if you're a white balding guy, apparently you look alike.
Yeah,
they keep saying we look alike. So.
Fair. We are both wearing shirts with like that.
We both have facial hair. Yes. We both have eyebrows.
Yeah.
So what do you read while you write? Because I know there's a lot of authors who say when they're writing, they won't read anything else because they feel like it'll influence them. Do you read while you write?
I do. Yeah. And I mean, take whatever I say with a grain of salt, because I haven't produced a book in a few years, but I would never give up reading. It's the reason I became a writer. And if I had to not read to be a writer, I would rather not do it. To be perfectly honest, nothing is like, I love reading. I wouldn't, if I couldn't do it, there's no point to being alive. Well, I could play video games or something like that, obviously.
No, Stephen King said the secret to being a great writer is to read a lot.
Yeah. And I think it helps a lot. It just expands your imagination. It gives you all kinds of cool ideas. Especially when you're reading like modern stuff, it lets you know like what's out there. Like reading a book like the Locked Tomb series, like the Tasman Mirror ones, Gideon the Ninth and stuff like that. Like reading those, and the language she uses is so modern that I feel like awful saying like I have Larkspur and Kings of the Wild say cool story, bro. And I remember feeling, I was like, yikes, can I get away with this? And like, that's nothing in like Gideon the Ninth. It's just like every single sentence is like that. So they let you know kind of what you're up against and what you can do and what boundaries you can push. Or have
Andrew
already been
says you're
blown
actually
away.
writing right now. He says you do about 50 blurbs a month. So that
I
counts.
do. Yeah, totally.
Hey, at least people want
Yeah.
you to do that. I feel like that's my end goal on this channel is to like
Yeah.
actually have a blurb on a major published author's book. You know, Christopher Rocky got one, but this publisher was like, "Who is this guy?" No.
Oh, so well, people. I mean, God, you should be on one. My buddy Eugene, who's like my best friend. He's my first proofreader of my books. He for a while did reviews for Grimdark magazine, and managed to get a quote on the Black Tongue Thief.
No kidding.
So technically, I'm on there and he's on there. So we got to blurb a book together.
Well, you know, dream big.
You'll get there, buddy.
So what are you reading right now then?
Right now, God, so I put these books beside me because I'll forget them in case I'm terrible with like remembering anything. So right now I'm reading. I was going to take a break from fantasy, believe it or not, because I just moved in with my girlfriend recently, and she's she reads a lot of fantasy too because I make her, but she reads a lot of just literature as well. So I read one of her favorite books, which is this thing. It's Small Game Hunting at the Local Coward Gun Club. It's very Canadian. It takes place in Newfoundland or Newfoundland. Everyone pronounces it differently. And yeah, it was also exquisitely written, but not like my kind of book. It just was all backstory. And then I went to Worldcon and I wanted to have a fantasy book. So I brought Gods of Jade and Shadow.
Who's that
right now? This one is Sylvia Moreno Garcia is her name. She wrote a very popular book called Mexican Gothic. She got a couple other books as well. And this is one of those books that, like I was talking about, it gives you so many ideas when you're reading it, just because it's about a culture that I'm not overly familiar with. It all takes place in Mexico in like the 1930s or 20s or something like that. And the way they deal with like fantasy elements and spirits and ghosts is just cool and new and refreshing to read. So far so good.
Brian Lee Durfee for me, and for some reason I always fall back on Ray Bradbury, so I picked up Fahrenheit again.
Yeah. Which Brian Lee Durfee are you reading?
Blackest Heart. It's the second book in his trilogy. So I've been putting that off for a while because his trilogy is going to be ending this year. So I said I wanted to read them all kind of together. So I love the first one like a whole lot.
Yeah.
And this one, actually I started doing a Song of Ice and Fire reread for the dozenth time, whatever. And Clash of Kings right now. It's so good. So I'm finishing that up, and then I'll finish that, and then it's like all horror in October. That's just kind of like my theme. Doing
well, I'm looking forward to hear what you think of Between Two Fires. It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, do you know Giles Christian?
I know of him. He wrote a book called Lancelot.
Yeah. He wrote a horror short story called Hellmouth, and it was pretty much what opened up this idea of, oh my God, this medieval horror thing is a great idea. And everybody said, Between Two Fires is basically kind of what started that. I'm like, okay, well, I got to make sure I get that this October then for sure.
I'm just pouring a drink here.
Hey, he's got some tea, guys. It's just sweet tea.
Some tea.
So what about playing? What are you playing right now? I know you're playing some games.
Well, I want to give a shout out too. I also do audiobooks all the time. I've always got one on the go. And I'm currently listening to the fourth and final book in Peter McLean's War for the Rose Throne series.
I have that on my 2023 series.
Oh, it's good. It's good. And if I know you said you don't do audiobooks, right?
I wish I could. It's all these years of blocking out my children. I can't turn that off. So I'll be listening to it and I'll be like, I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah. Well, he's got a good narrator. He's got a narrator that sounds just like him in real life, which is like that he's smoke a lot and drink a lot. And you've got that husky British voice. So he's got that kind of guy doing his narration. And for a book about like fantasy gangsters, it's absolutely perfect. So
everybody tells me that they got like it. There's some people who told me I don't know, man. I had to nope out like really early. It was just like way too brutal. I was like, really? Tell me more.
Oh yeah, brutal. Great. Yeah.
That's why I read that kind of stuff, But
I was sad to see it was picked up to be a fantasy or to a TV show, and it's in limbo right now, I guess. Apparently.
Yeah, I'm talking to Fonda Lee this weekend, and her series it Peacock, I think, had the rights, and they just let them go. So
it'll find a new home. I'm sure. It's such a good series. And
yeah, it was really good. It was
right
really
for
good. I
TV.
didn't expect to like that as much as it was. Just so many people recommended it, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
I don't know, man. That just sounds kind of weird. But I mean, I love The Godfather. It's one of my favorite movies ever.
Oh yeah,
And that's really what it made me think of was The Godfather.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Really
I haven't read the third book yet, but I'll be getting it soon.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. It's very, very satisfying.
I've heard that. Yeah, I heard it's perfect.
Okay, here's one from Madison. She says, you make the best cocktails on Instagram. So what do you, I am drinking coffee, and it's just straight coffee.
Hail Reaper, nice.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of phenomenal audiobooks, holy Jesus, that's the audiobook to end the audiobook.
Gerard guy, right? Yes, Madison like draws hearts around his picture on the Discord and stuff. She loves him. So
you sure it's not
I know
Pierce
more
Brown?
about audiobooks for someone who doesn't listen to audiobooks, because every comment I get is, "Have you listened to the audiobook? This narrator is amazing." You know. So
yeah. Well, they can. I mean, there are some books that whenever I recommend to people, I always recommend the audiobook, and that's Red Rising is numero uno, just because it's a narrator and it's narration, and the gravity he puts to those scenes are just heartbreaking.
I listen to some because whenever somebody recommends an audiobook a lot, I'll go into Audible and I'll check out the sample just to hear what it sounds like. The reason I can't listen to it, guys, like I said, I will miss stuff, and then I'll go to review it, and I will say something, and people will be like, "What are you talking about? That never happened," or "Did you even read this book?" So that's why I don't even attempt the audio, because I know I'll miss stuff. Anyway.
Well, you get a lot of reading done anyway.
What I don't know what for some reason, I just never pictured Darrow as just like some big Irish lout. That's just what he sounds like. So
it's true. It's true.
He sounds very talented. But you didn't tell her what you're drinking.
Well, Madison, currently I am drinking just literally straight bourbon. But right before that, I had a White Russian, which I only drank recently because I had the ingredients. He's going to
get really, really loose-lipped here by the end. It's going to be great.
Ooh, it takes me a lot. I got a very high tolerance, believe it or not. Worked in restaurants for 15 years, so.
Yeah, that's how you met Sebastian T. Castell. I believe you told me that story last
time.
That is,
yeah.
Wow. Crazy.
Thank you, Matt Hunt's books.
What are you playing right now? You said Warhammer, I believe, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm playing a lot of things. Well, two things at the moment. Warhammer 3 Total War, which Total War is just one of my favorite series in general. It's the only thing that, for me, that comes close to eclipsing Final Fantasy. They're obviously very, very different games, but I love almost every single Total War game. And the Warhammer one's just phenomenal. Like I had always kind of dreamed of like what a fantasy version of Total War could be, and I didn't know anything about Warhammer going into it. And now they just released the third game. It was an absolute trash fire when they released it. Like it was, oh my God, it was bad. But they did it with the second game and the first game, and now they've done it with all three games. Just put all three of them together and meld this one giant world with, there's 86 or something playable factions at the moment, and 270 actually in the game, and it is just like the scope of it is beyond belief. So it's a pretty good game. And then I'm also playing on my PlayStation 5 Ghost of Tsushima, which is awesome.
I am also playing that, but on PlayStation 4, because I'm
yeah, I think it looks the same pretty much, except for like a couple tidbits.
The thing with that is, like, that game came out when I was back in business school, and I was like, this is going to be way too distracting. So I've just now kind of like got back into it. And also, whenever I try to, play a game, because I got this, amazing television, I want to play games on it because they look incredible, right? And then my wife complains that I'm taking over the TV whenever I play a game like that. So I wait till she's like not really interested in watching anything, and then I kind of really get to it. But that and playing Gears of War with my oldest kid, playing through that series.
Oh, awesome.
We've been stuck on Gears of War 5 for a bit now, because there's so much more to do in that game. But really replaying a lot of stuff with my kids is a lot of fun. And I need to replay God of War, because the new God of War comes out in November, and I need a refresher because it's such an awesome game. So
yeah, God, I would never ever say that God of War isn't an awesome game, but I don't think I'm going to play the next one, just because I don't really like puzzles in games, and that game is all puzzle. It should be called God of Puzzles. It's just like the fighting is just like a segue into the next puzzle.
I used to get this with people about when I say I love Tomb Raider games. Like, I just want to shoot stuff. There's way too much puzzle solving.
Exactly. So
but
but a beautiful game. Like, my God.
Like a lot of people I know are into MMO RPGs. So I'm like, I'm single player couch or couch co-op kind of guy. I don't know all that. I'm still an old soul like that. I got friends if I want to play games. I don't need to go on the internet and play with strangers. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I'm usually a single player person myself, either strategy or RPGs. I do play Final Fantasy 14 online, which is like it's just an awesome MMO.
It's what you're drinking, Bullet Bourbon?
Yeah, Bullet
Bullet
Bourbon.
Bourbon
Yeah,
and
it's pretty much
rye.
the Wyld bourbon for every restaurant I ever worked at. Yeah, because
I
it is
see.
like that person, like they say, it's great straight and it's great in like old fashions.
God, I forget what it is. I just had maybe Andrew, if he's still here, he can remind me because he was really high on it. I posted a picture of it. A friend of mine got a promotion and he just wanted me to come over and kill this bottle of bourbon with him. I'm like,
Nice,
say no
nice.
more. And we did.
Yeah.
We tore that whole thing down. So yeah, may remember. Yeah, I really, really like this stuff. And I remember I lost like 100 pounds and I can't drink like this anymore. So
yeah.
So make sure you factor in some nap time after that.
But yeah, and then I took a break from playing. I played the game Yakuza Like a Dragon. Have you ever heard of that game?
Heard of it, you know?
Yeah, it's the Yakuza series is like an action RPG, I would call it, I guess. But Yakuza Like a Dragon went full on like turn-based RPG, like Final Fantasy style, and it was mind-blowingly good. Like my favorite game of the year, bar none. And I played Elden Ring. Played the shit out of it. And so I'm going to start at the beginning of the Yakuza series with Yakuza 0, which is not the first one, but the origin story, and play through all those as well.
Man, with me, go ahead.
I was just going to answer my favorite bourbon. I don't really have one, actually. I don't have one. Like I do like, God, I want to say
in my glass.
Yeah, I want to say Lot 40, but I got a feeling it's more like whiskey. But bourbon, I mean, yeah, I love Jack Daniels, even though it's it's very, it's
commercial.
Nothing tastes quite like it.
No, Jack Daniels is the Metallica of whiskey, and that's fine. I like Metallica.
Yeah, I recently took a flight on American Airlines. This is my first time, and when you ask for like a Ryan Coke or a whiskey and Coke, they give you Jack Daniels, and I was like, "This is incredible! What a country!"
Before I got acid reflux real bad from drinking whiskey all those years,
yeah,
I used to Wild Turkey like nonstop. That was like my thing, Wild Turkey. I still keep it for whenever we got a cold or something like that. You kind of sweat it out. So keep a bottle of that on hand. But yeah, I know these are really, really trendy, maybe somewhat cheapy picks, but you know what? To me, it's like it still gets you to where you're going. So I'm not a snob.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a buddy he's that buddy Eugene of mine. He's a big whiskey fan, and I remember he started trashing this Jack Daniels, and I'm like, buddy, Jack Daniels is like it is like historic. Like there is not a rock star in the world like those back in the 70s that didn't have a bottle of Jack Daniels on stage or multiple. Like it's the drink of rock and roll.
Mike Anthony from Van Halen had a guitar that was a Jack Daniels bottle.
Awesome,
iconic,
awesome.
Right? Love it. They were to say, you know what they tried to do in Van Halen. With different singers and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, whatever. But when they took Mike Anthony out of the band, to me, it was just like, it just doesn't sound the same, man.
Yeah.
Really random conversation.
Well, once anyone leaves a band, it's never, I mean, obviously bands have recovered from it. I think AC/DC obviously is a pretty good example, but sometimes once a member's gone, it's over.
Yeah. It's hard to replace a singer usually, but yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but look at Zeppelin didn't even replace John Bonham. They were like, our drummer's gone. It's over.
We got to talk about House of the Dragon. We got to talk about Rings of Power. And it's one of those things where people are like, and I use the sports analogy of like, that's when people say, oh, you can't compare the quarterback and the running back from that draft because, they play different. These two shows came out at the same time. They're the two biggest shows in fantasy. We're going to talk about them. Arguably they're the two most recognizable fantasy series out there. So people are going to be comparing them. I will say I think that House of the Dragon is amazing. I love. I've read Fire and Blood for the second time right before it came out.
Yeah,
I love it. I think the show is great. I think that Rings of Power. I have problems with it, but I also don't think it's this travesty that people are acting like it is. But I'm curious what your thoughts are because I talked about Rings of Power, and again, the comment section was not nice because they basically they wanted me to flip tables and yell and scream, blasphemy or something. I don't know. I'm not as married to the Silmarillion, I guess, as everybody else. What are you thinking about Rings of Power right now?
Well, I will start by saying House of Dragon is awesome. It's so good. I had
That's
my
on
doubts.
TV already. Yeah.
Oh, it's just amazing. And comparing it to say something like Wheel of Time, which we've discussed, like it's got an issues, and people love Wheel of Time and people hate Wheel of Time. I wanted to love Wheel of Time and didn't like Wheel of Time, but I hope it gets better.
Can only get better, I hope.
Yeah. And the difference was watching House of the Dragon. You watch it and you have no input on it. It's just so good that it's just like you just watch it and it is what it is. Whereas watching Wheel of Time, like every 5 minutes, there was like a logical inconsistency that was like, what is happening? Like to say the guy that wants to cross the river because his son's on the other side and the other riverbed is thronged with Trollocs. And he's still going to go. And you're just like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. There might as well not be another shore. It's thronged with Trollocs. I don't fucking care if your son's right there. You're not going back. This doesn't make any sense within the context of the world. And I'm one of those people, and this will like come up again in discussing Rings of Power. I could give a fuck if it like cleaves to the books. I don't care at all. I hope the characters are similar. I don't care about the plot. I know it's different. It's movie. It's got to be exciting for, more palatable for audiences. There's a reason the TV television is more popular than books, because it's more palatable. So I understand having to change plots, but it just didn't make any sense. So watching House of the Dragon was so refreshing because it was just like good and it knew what it was. It didn't make any missteps within its own like logical thing. So you could like it or not like it if you like that kind of thing, but you couldn't pick it apart the way you could Wheel of Time, I think.
No, that's what we've been saying. We do an after show for that. What I think is great about this is that's based off of a book that is like a history book where this happened and then this happened. And it leaves it's all up to you to kind of figure out. Also, it's told from like a historical standpoint of this could be very unreliable. This is like stuff that happened 100 years ago, friend of a friend of a friend kind of recounting these things. And so I was like, that's why on the show, I was like, dude, they've got so much wiggle room. All they have to do is say, okay, we got to get from this point to this point. It's up to us to fill in the gaps on how it gets there. And if it's a little different than you think it might have been, hey, this is the official history. This is, maybe that's how it happened. I think it's great.
Yeah.
It gives them so much wiggle room for people like me that will say, hey, it was better the way that George wrote it. It keeps them from going into that fan fiction territory.
Yeah.
That Dan and Dave did, but it also keeps it, where, hey, they've got wiggle room to kind of get there, the way that they want to. And thankfully, Ryan Condal he loves A Song of Ice and Fire. So
yeah,
very respectful to it.
Well, you can't, I can't begrudge people when if they want something to be like the books, then that's just them. You can't, but I would advise anyone just to make their life better is to stop that. Just fucking knock it off because you're not going to be happy.
I'd like the spine of the story to be the same. I'd like the characters to be recognizable.
Yeah, totally.
If they didn't say it this way, they said this. I don't care.
That's crazy. It's just crazy to think that. But then there's things like you see the Aes Sedai at the end of Wheel of Time, and the women aren't on leashes, and it's like why they made that choice, but it's like no, that's kind of part of the books. Like you got to put them, or they make that giant tidal wave. At the end of the series, they make that giant tidal wave. The little girl on the shore
on the beach was a whole lot of trouble. Let's make
and I remember having a friend being like, they loved the show, and they were like, oh, I wonder what that tidal wave was all about. I'm like, that was about nothing. They did that just for the shock of it, to try to make it shocking. I guarantee you, tidal wave's got nothing to do with anything that's coming. They're just trying to make a giant tidal wave and make it look cool. Period.
It was crazy. Episode was just man. Woo.
Yeah. So with Wheel of Time, or with Rings of Power, like I'm someone who I like, Lord of the Rings was the first book I ever read. I love it dearly. I role played in it. I did D&D games, or Middle Earth, like role playing, or it was called. Did it all. Just I have a deep love for it, and I still don't give a shit if they change characters. I don't care. I just want a good show that takes place in Middle Earth. Part of me would, I was like, I would like companies to stop rehashing properties like Lord of the Rings and make Jade City a TV show, for instance. But at the same time, because I love Lord of the Rings, I like anything that takes place in that world. And so, I'm way more open to it being good. I was way more kind of receptive, and I think it is good so far. Like there's not I'm not every 5 minutes I'm not like, oh, that's terrible, that's terrible, that's terrible, that's terrible. maybe the dwarf elf drinking contest was a bit goofy, but I'm not one of those people that thinks Tolkien would roll in his grave, because first of all, anyone who wrote anything in like the 20s or 30s or 40s would roll in their grave, compared to nowadays. And I'd like to think he would evolve as a human being if he lived for another 100 years, and yeah, so I think it's pretty good. Like I remember seeing the trailers and thinking those hobbits look pretty sketchy looking, but they're great. They feel really cool. They feel to me what like hobbits would be like 100 years before or 200 years before, however long it takes place, 1,000 years.
I like to look at the positive side of things, and the positive for me is, look, we've never gotten a live action version of Numenor, so getting to see Numenor has been like
so cool.
And Elendil in his prime, not just getting clocked by Sauron at the beginning of the movie. Seeing these things was just really awesome to me. So I'm all for that. If they can show me the fall of Numenor on this show, hell, take my money. I mean,
that'd be really cool. That. And as someone who when you're playing a DM and you're making up stories in Middle Earth, like that's kind of what I think. It's a healthier way to look at it than, I've seen someone who's like, oh, I love the show, but I just wish they'd, I'm trying to forget some of my Tolkien lore. And it's like, stop trying to even remember it. It's got nothing to do with the Tolkien lore. It's just sandboxing in the world. And I think it would make people so much happier if they just went into shows without expectations like that,
The comparison that I made is everybody loves the Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor video games. And I'm like, dude, those things are so blasphemous with the lore. It's not even funny. Do you guys remember Sexy Shelob? Come on. And I was like, you guys will let that go. But this show, apparently it's just gone too far. I'm like, are you for real?
They're really up in arms about it.
And they had nothing to do with the original lore. So, I don't know.
And you're looking at the review bombing that's been done about it. Like it's got these, negative reviews. Even today I was looking at it on Rotten Tomatoes, and like it has more reviews than twice as many reviews as Game of Thrones ever had, and it's like kind of sketchy. It's just like, people just hate so hard without realizing that they're in fact the orcs. You can not like Lord of the Rings because it has logical consistency with the show, or it's a bad show. But if you just don't want to like it because it's not exactly what you want, then
Well, with me, I said I was going to treat it like I did Witcher, where I was like, okay, Witcher's, they decided in that second season they're not too interested in following the book. So I was like, but you know what? I'm still enjoying the show. So I was like, maybe I could just look at it as a show and be fine. I'm watching it with my wife and my kid, and they both are enjoying the show. So hey.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I mean, it's not on the same level as something like House of Dragon. I don't think House of the Dragon is just so good, But so far it's got like that frivolity. God, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it, but like the elf that's trapped in the orc camp, like that's just an awesome storyline, and awful things are happening. So it's got a lot. It's a bit darker, and it's got a lot more despair than I thought that they would do.
I thought it was pretty funny. People are like, oh, these characters don't act anything like Tolkien characters. Like, are you kidding? There was an elf apologizing to a tree. That's the most Tolkien thing ever.
Tom Bombadil, folks, come on. Tom Bombadil.
Yeah,
like, that was the goofiest
if
thing.
You're going to compare the two, sure. I think House of Dragons is blowing it away, but I think House of Dragons is blowing away just about anything else on TV, not named Cobra Kai right now. So
yeah, exactly. So I love Rings of Power. I wanted it to be good. I want everything.
Look, I went into it expecting to hate it. I don't know why. I did go into it expecting to hate it. And here's the thing: I'm not seething watching it like I was Wheel of Time, where I was like, this isn't even recognizable, man. These characters don't even seem like the same characters,
Yeah.
But if you're going to compare it to House of Dragon, it's rather amazing that Amazon spent about 8 times per episode what House of Dragon is, and House of Dragon somehow still looks better. It's amazing. I just think HBO's just got something about their aesthetic that no one else gets.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, Lord of the Rings does look pretty good, but it doesn't look as good as Game of Thrones ultimately. I mean, it's a bit more ambitious with the CGI, but like the clothing, I don't think looks as good.
The wigs are about par with both of them, though.
Yeah. But I mean, to me, it feels so much like the movies did. The movies were sometimes serious and sometimes kind of frivolous, and it just feels the same.
There you go. If you could see an adaptation of any fantasy book, no matter how niche, what would you want to see?
What about you?
The First Law, Joe Abercrombie. I think that'd be
Ooh, yeah.
great television. But it would have to you'd have to go all in and just make it as messed up as the book is. And it depends who you cast as a Galacta can make or break that show. So
Oh, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. God, it'd be pretty funny to fan cast Glockta and just pick the most absurd people to play him. Ricky Gervais is Glockta. Mine will be Kings of the Wild. Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. Let's see. I can't pick that
Don't
one.
you think it would be a nightmare trying to get the rights to all that music, though?
No, I mean, if it would be a television show, it'd be harder because obviously their budgets are smaller, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I remember when I've talked about it with the people that optioned it, and it was like, as long as you get like a song for the opening credits, a song for the ending credits, and then one song an episode, you could get by. You know, you could get by on having other music, but have that rock and roll opening, the rock and roll ending, and a rock and roll song in the middle. You could get by. If it's a movie, then it doesn't really matter. You know, like something like Thor: Love and Thunder has a trillion songs in it, and could be just like that. You know, just license it all.
So Thin Lizzy would have to be the opening intro song, right?
Well, it depends. I mean,
if you could get it.
My opening intro song on Kings of the Wild on the soundtrack on Spotify is Bubba O'Reilly.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
I love the Who, so I'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
It would be hard to please with me if you couldn't get the rights to something. I'm sure you can get the rights to something else. You know,
exactly. There's a lot out there. Maybe some Rush.
It's Tom Bombadil is goofy. Come at me.
Yeah, Tom Bombadil's a goofy guy. He's a goofy guy with a hot wife.
Oh man, I get people so mad when I say that I had no problems with Tom Bombadil not being in the movie. There was Tolkien fans that would be at the theater were just like raged about it. I was like, I thought it was better without him. They're like, what?
100%. But I mean, to each their own. If someone thinks opposite, then sure. But yeah, I wouldn't put him in if I were making a show.
Yes, Scott is right. Tons of Rush would be necessary because Rush is necessary for everything. If you don't like Rush, I don't care if you don't like his voice. They're amazing. You got to admit they're amazingly
their songwriting,
technical,
especially is great.
They really are. I love them. I love them. Reading Kings of the Wild, I always picture like Lute and Bard covers of the rock and roll soundtrack from hardcore to bardcore.
Yeah,
I still hope you do write that Bard's Tale kind of book. I would definitely be interested in hearing.
Yeah, that'd be a fun idea someday. We'll see. But
Jack Black is Tom Bombadil. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah,
actually pretty good. Yeah. And he can sing too. You know, he can do some Tenacious D covers.
He'd be great. I was like, back when not that I had a say in my first audiobook narrator, but I was like, if you're gonna have a dream narrator for Kings of the Wild, it'd be Jack Black. I think he would have done a hell of a job.
Yeah, he already answered this one, but yes, he's quite a fan of R. Scott Baker, even though he thinks his storytelling is a little off.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Scott Baker. Guy Gabriel Kay, I love. He's my favorite author in the world. And Stephen Erickson, amazing. R. Scott Baker's great. Like, sentence for sentence, he's one of the best writers I've ever read in my life. I wish his stories were more coherent so I could recommend them to more people, and also that I knew where a scene was being set, like what was happening. Because some of the scenes, like no one writes the battle scenes like him, epic battle scenes, and they're not everyone's cup of tea, but I love them. They're kind of like the old history books where it would be like this country showed up to the field with 3,000 men, so and so, or like Lord of the Rings even. In this company, and he manages to nail the descriptions of these companies showing up. You get their country, their culture, everything about them. It's just one little sentence, and then it's on to the next until you've described an army that's like 300,000 people strong. And what I love about R. Scott Baker too is that his battles are epic. Like sometimes you get these battles in fantasy books that are like 200 people against 200 people, and I'm like, I didn't sign up for this shit. Like I could find 200 friends to fight right now. Like I'm here for the tens of thousands of people in a battle. So Scott Baker does those really, really well.
That's all right. We got Tolkien hate in the comments, so I'm not even gonna respond to that. So there's almost nothing of Robert E. Howard's books in the Conan movie, but I still love them. True. I love the original Conan movie, but it's like you go and read Robert E. Howard's like you can imagine Arnold in your head. I mean, it's kind of hard not to at this point, I think, especially our generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, go read the Howard stories, man. They're incredible.
Yeah. I remember when they did like who optioned Kings of the Wild had made a sample script or sample like a plot thing and sent it to me to review. And they actually let me entirely change it. But in the opening thing, Last Leaf was described as a hulking man beast that comes out of the forest. And I was like, just so you know, he's more of just kind of like a waifish David Bowie kind of character. But if you think hulking man beast is going to sell to a producer, then go for it. I don't care. And they were like, no, David Bowie sounds cool. You change him. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'll change him. So yeah, it's things like that. Even with my own work, I just want what's going to be best.
So is there any progress on that at all?
Yeah, it's kind of near the end of its 3-year. They optioned it for 3 years, and it's at the very end of it coming up. And boy, has been some close calls, and I'm like usually pretty good at not getting my hopes up about these things, as a side effect from sending my book out to agents for years and getting rejected.
Right.
But there was one day where the guy who's got it was like, I got to call you tomorrow. This meeting's happening. I can't wait. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, holy shit. And my hopes were up. And the next day it was like the meeting was that the talks had fallen apart. Oh. So I was crushed. But who knows? It's one of those things. It's still going. I think we're probably going to try to keep this deal we've got going for another few months, just because there are enough irons in the fire that it's worth letting people, take the bait or not on. But yeah, I suppose if if all the things that could possibly happen fall apart, which is very, very, very possible, don't get me wrong, then the rights would revert to me and I would sell them again, or hopefully sell them again. I feel it's kind of like Fonda Lee's book. Like, Jade City has got to be a show someday, and it just will be. And even though, I never thought I'd be a published writer, but I'm more confident about Kings of the Wild being like a TV show or movie someday than I ever was about it being a book. Like,
really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. As I said, I was talking to the guy who's got it rights today, and I'm like, because I saw that Skydance, or was it Sky? Or yeah. Anyways, although people they're trying to make TV shows, they're trying to make this a TV show. But to me, like, it would make a great movie too. Just like take a bunch of aging actors, stick them together, and watch the millions of dollars roll in, and put a classic rock soundtrack on it. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer. And it wouldn't have to have so little to do with the book. Just use that idea and you've got a blockbuster, I think.
All right, you can cast any aging actor as Clay. Who you casting?
Mine would be David Harbour from Stranger Things.
Nice.
Yeah. He's big, burly. He's got that father figure kind of thing.
I can't unsee that now. That's perfect. Great.
Right? He's perfect.
All right. You don't want to hear my thoughts on Name of the Wind, but they want to know your thoughts on Name of the Wind.
I've heard your thoughts on Name of the Wind. Yeah. I really like Name of the Wind. And it's another book that's somewhat hard to recommend to people because it doesn't have an ending, and nor does it have a ton of action. I remember the end of the climax of the first book. It's not like anything to write home about, but to me, like, as a prose person, I do love a beautifully structured sentence and paragraph, and that book has it in spades. As far as quotable lines go, it has more quotes on Goodreads than almost any other book pulled out of it, because it is so beautiful. And it's one of those books that's like, the journey is more important than the destination with those books, to me. So you could read Name of the Wind and you could never read another book after that in that series, and it was worth reading to me, again, just because of the deliciousness of the prose. If I read a book and I don't, this is blasphemy to some people, but like turn down a corner of a page or something like that, and there's not like tons of beautiful lines in it, I probably won't read that author again, no matter how good the story was. It's got to be beautifully written. Well,
you said you could read Name of the Wind and then never read another book, and that's how I went with that series.
Exactly. If you read the second book, I don't think it matters. Like, I mean, and if you don't like it, if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. But my God, there's a line in that book, and I'll get to this question on the screen, but there's a line in that book, like, he's talking about his love for Denna, or his infatuation with Denna, and talking about how it was like walking on the ice and feeling it crack and groan beneath you, in that sense of like, danger and excitement and thrill. And I was like, God damn it, that's a beautiful paragraph and a beautiful thought. And so many books go by without a thought like that. It's got, yes, great action scenes, cool characters, funny lines, but no, sentiments like that, which is, to me, is something that I really enjoy. Let's see. Building a motley crew is always tough to make sure everyone is distinct. How did you build the Kings of Wyld band? Did the personality traits come from? God, that was almost too easy, just because they're all such obvious archetypes,
I went through and I was like, hey, this is this character, this is this rock star,
yeah. And they're pretty much, archetypes are very much based on the instrument that they represent. So with Gabriel, he's like the lead singer, so he's got to be, kind of the flamboyant, the talker, the face of the group. With Clay is like, that represents the bass player, so he's kind of like, he's like the most, always, it's like you can name a band and you always forget the name of the bass player, not always, but it happens a lot. And so, yeah, he's kind of like the steady thrum that without him in the group, you don't have a song, and then Matrick is the drummer, represents the drummer, fights with two knives. So he's that kind of character. And then Moog is like the guy that plays the triangle or the keyboard or lights the fireworks off. And he was just a mix between the classic wizard or the zany keyboardist.
So I guess you've been talking about Against All Gods by Miles Cameron.
Yeah. Miles Cameron is someone his name's Christian in real life, who I absolutely adore. I met him at the first con I ever went to, where I also met Guy Gabriel K. But Christian just kind of took me under his wing, and he lives in Toronto. He's an ex-American that moved to Canada. He writes historical fiction and then moved into fantasy and writes very historical fantasy. And yeah, he writes so goddamn fast, and I'm trying to like model my life and work ethic after him, because he is never like angsty, never stressed about anything writing wise. He just does his job. He goes to the same coffee shop every day, eats a scone and somehow remains skinny, drinks a little espresso so he doesn't have to like pee 8 times, which I learned from him during a writing session. And he just fucking pumps out books, and they're so good. So yeah, Against All Gods is the most recent one. It's kind of a Bronze Age fantasy, which I remember us both talking about wanting to write a Bronze Age fantasy book. And I'm like, cool, I'll still be writing Outlaw Empire. You'll write 6 more books and then this Bronze Age fantasy. And that's exactly what's happened. So yeah, it's very cool. It's the first of a series. Yeah. And there's just not many books quite like it.
I have his Trader's Son book, but I've never actually started any. I just really got into historical fiction recently.
Yeah.
Bernard Cornwell.
Yeah.
But I liked it a lot more than I was expecting to, honestly. I mean, I know everybody like hyped up Bernard Cornwell. I talked to John Gwynn, and he hadn't have enough great things to say about Bernard Cornwell. So I thought for sure I was going to like him. I just wasn't sure how I felt really being attached to Thomas Mallory's version of King Arthur, about kind of a historical fiction, kind of reality based, and you're going to turn Lancelot into a villain and all these things. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I thought it was awesome. So I definitely want to read more from him. But
yeah, he's good, and I think you'll like Miles Cameron. He's got a lot of he's got a historical fiction books. It's funny. Years ago, I bought this out or pulled this Alexander book off a friend's shelf and said, "Can I borrow this?" And I haven't read it, but little did I know that years later he would become like a beloved friend of mine. And yeah, he's got a series called Masters and Mages, which is relatively recent. It's after the one that you mentioned. And it's very much, the first book is like a Name of the Wind, except shorter and faster and more fast-paced. But like the main character learns skills and loves learning skills and gets better throughout the book. So if you like that kind of like progression fantasy kind of stuff, boy, oh boy, he's got some good.
Well, I just learned about this progression fantasy thing this year. There's these books called Cradle by Will White.
Yeah.
And everyone recommended it to me. And I was like, it's not for me. I can see why people like it. But I was just like, it felt like I was just reading a book about people grinding for XP on like Final Fantasy 3 or some shit.
Yeah. I've heard great things about it. But yeah, there's something to be said. And that's one of the charms of Name of the Wind, I think, too, is that the character is learning stuff. And I mean, and one thing that doesn't get referenced about Name of the Wind, why I think it's so insanely popular, is that the character is poor and trying to put themselves through school. And how fucking relatable is that? You know, like that just doesn't happen in many fantasy books.
I said
Dritz
that's the
Do'Urden
reason I
is
think
not
that.
poor or trying to put himself through school, you know?
That's why I said I thought that a lot of people that were younger than me really liked Name of the Winds because they were still trying to pay back their student loans. So.
Yeah, exactly. So Kvothe has got that, and he's going out with his friends, and you know, try to make the most of his life. So it's got that relatability.
So speaking of Final Fantasy, Austin wants to know what's your
Yeah.
favorite Final Fantasy game?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Ultimately, it has to be Final Fantasy 14, the online one, only because it has everything that's ever been in every Final Fantasy into one. And its Shadowbringers expansion was the greatest Final Fantasy story ever told. That said, I really love, like most people, Final Fantasy VII. And I have a deep, deep love for the Dark Horse Final Fantasy VIII, which so many people don't like.
Really?
And I know is like,
system drove me crazy.
oh, it's got some awful grinding. Attaching the spells to your weapons is just a stupid idea. But I was just at that age. It was so cinematic. Like I used to put that opening cinematic on and just watch it on repeat for hours. And it was just so cool. The assassination scene, and like I loved its cinematics. I loved its soundtrack. It's got the best, to me at least, the best ending of anything that exists, including movies, books, video games, anything. Because after the credits roll, the credits roll rather, it's got like a camcorder video of everyone celebrating their
Playing
victory.
The famous Final Fantasy song too.
Yeah. And then as it ends, you're wondering if this character's still alive, and suddenly the battery, which has been going lower the entire time, starts to blink and goes out. And it's just brilliantly done.
I mean, I'm old school. I got to go with Final Fantasy 3 in the States, 6 everywhere else on the Super Nintendo. I played that.
6 was great.
Because I started with the original one on Nintendo, and I played it way more than I should have. And then 2 and then 3. And then when 3 came out, it was like all those games promised and so much more. And it had so like 16 main characters, and they were all interesting. You know, there was no like, oh God, not this. And that storyline was just like super tight. Had one of the most unique villains ever in Kefka.
Yeah,
I love it. But I mean, 7, just like everyone else. I think everyone likes 7. But I think I really stopped. I think 10 was the last one I really played. So I can't say anything about like the last 20 years, you know?
Yeah, there's some good ones. I mean, 13 was like pretty cool. It's pretty on rails, but the fighting system is cool. 15 has got an amazing fighting system, but it was just literally unfinished. So it was a kind of a bummer. I have high hopes for the next one, though, because the guy doing Final Fantasy 16 is the guy they got to fix Final Fantasy 14 online when it absolutely bombed. And so it looks so damn cool. And I got a feeling all your characters, from what I got from the trailer, your characters like are the classic summon spells. Like one of your characters is Shiva, one's Ifrit. I could be wrong, but it just looks pretty wicked.
You're like this. The mental image of Moog with the triangle is going to stick in my head forever now.
As it should be. As it should be. Wouldn't he be the guy? He'd probably pull the triangle in battle. Do something stupid with it.
I love all those characters. So you're going to play Hogwarts Legacy when it comes out? I am. I mean, my whole family is. I mean, we're big Harry Potter people here. So, yeah, we're definitely going to open world. It's just an open world at Hogwarts. Yes, I'm going to try it for sure. So I love a good open world sandbox.
I will not be. I love the movies. I've never read all the books. Obviously, I'm sure they're awesome, but just not my kind of game. I'm just strategy.
He doesn't like fun, you guys. There's not enough turn-based. He wants it to be turn-based.
Strategy or gritty. Like I could take a Ghost of Tsushima if it's really effing good, but otherwise I like my JRPGs.
You know, it was I hadn't played a turn-based RPG in decades, and I think I got like Dragon Quest 11 or something like that randomly out of because it was on sale on Steam one day. I was like, I had no idea how much I missed this. You have to think like 3 steps ahead the whole time. It's so fun. It's so fun. It's something to be said. I mean, when RPGs like that really went to real-time fighting and stuff, I felt like it just kind of turned them into hack and slash, where I was like, you really had to think and strategize with the old turn-based stuff. So
yeah, they can be. There's some good hybrids, like I said, Final Fantasy 15. When you're in the combat, I was like, this is what I was imagining back in Final Fantasy 1 when my fighter was going forward and going like this with his hand. So there is a good hybrid method, but I agree. Like I love the turn-based stuff. You ever played Persona at all?
No, and there's a good friend of mine who all of the time is like, you're looking for a throwback, you got to play Persona. I just never.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd like it or not. It's got a lot of stuff besides its JRPG elements, and the dungeons are kind of super grindy. But Oh my God, those are good games. Like I haven't missed one, nor will I
Well,
ever.
one of my favorite ever is Xenogears back on the old
Oh
PlayStation.
yeah,
I
it was
love that.
great.
I mean, I'm not a real big
Yeah,
anime guy,
Tactics.
but I freaking love that. But
Yeah.
Tactics gave me fits, man. I'm not even going to talk about how that game. That might be one of the original like flipping tables games for me.
Oh
Because
really?
that game cheated. It cheated
Wow.
so hard.
God.
It's that kind of thing where you have them beat and they get that one final hit before, like, you will defeat them. They'll be defeated, but they get their last hit before they disintegrate, and it'll be the one that kills you.
Yeah. You know what's another good one? I don't know if you ever played it, is Fire Emblem, and there's tons of them, but Fire Emblem Awakening for me was just phenomenal. The series was almost dead apparently, and this game resuscitated it. And it's one of those games where you can pair characters up, and depending on who you pair them up with, they have children that come back from the future to help you battle this evil in the present day, and it's just so cool. It was such a good game.
Hey, this person wants to know what's your favorite tome that's not fantasy or sci-fi. We're talking 600 to 1,000 pages.
Reading
outside of fantasy and fantasy.
Favorite giant novels.
War and Peace.
I haven't read War and Peace. Ooh, I haven't read like Shogun and Gaijin. I thought they were really
Shogun.
great.
That's my next big giant. That and Lonesome Dove are my two big giant ones outside of fantasy that I want to do.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. I mean, I think I was way younger when I read it, and I remember thinking it was really anticlimactic, but I think an older me would appreciate it a lot more. And then they're not like giant tomes, but I really do like Salman Rushdie books or Haruki Murakami books as well. They're usually not that big, but I definitely, whenever I'm not reading fantasy, I usually read those.
Good picks. Have I asked you about your D&D RPG experience already? Have we talked about this?
God, probably. But to reference it again, started playing Dungeons and Dragons in high school. I had a friend that I met who's the first I ever skipped school was to go play Dungeons and Dragons.
You rebel.
And yeah, pretty much a Satanist after that. It's a slippery slope. He had like the old red box kind of stuff, and I loved it. Immediately took over DMing from him. And then before that, my grandma had actually bought me, because I love Lord of the Rings so much, bought me this thing called MERP, like Middle Earth Role Playing, which is based on another system that I should know the name of it, but I don't. And I looked at it. I had all these little paper like figurines in it, and I looked at these rules and thought, what the fuck is going on? And I put it away for like 5 years, and I don't think she ever knew how much I loved that, because then I got back into it in college and played the shit out of it. And it's very, very dense compared to D&D. And it's got this massive tables, pages upon pages of tables, depending on what weapons you use, what injuries you get. And they are very specific. Like your cranium cracks open, you lie bleeding for 6 minutes and then expire, wishing you'd never been born, like shit like that. It was really good. And then I started playing D&D, and I played just a ton of D&D. It's been a while since I had a good group.
We had started, I was like, that was like the one nerd thing I'd never done. And we had finally gotten together a group. We were going to play. The friend got like this old, like 100-inch LCD TV that he actually like would draw the maps on them. We could put our characters on it. It was amazing. And then COVID happened. And we tried doing it one time over Zoom. We're like, this is not it. So it didn't actually play. But I just started reading Forgotten Realms with Driss. So like,
that'll get you back into it.
Right?
You can literally hear the dice rolling if you listen carefully during. It's like Driss is running across the field, and suddenly 6 snow leopards popped up.
I love every once in a while there's a a beast or something like a mind flare. And I'm like, oh, I know that one.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Well, I mean, God knows I used a lot of those monsters in. Obviously, owlbears in Kings of the Wild. There's a part where they run across in the forest this thing called an ettercap, which is like this spidery little thing. And I always used to have one when I was playing D&D with my friends. There would always be an ettercap. He would always be at a crossroads, and when they asked which way, he would always point the wrong direction. And so I have that in Kings of the Wild. The same thing happens. So.
I like the Gorgons. I feel like Gorgons are really underused. And
out
there. Yes, Austin, I love Chrono Trigger. I think Chrono Trigger is one of the best RPGs ever made. I don't think that anyone my age range that had a Super Nintendo and even interested in RPGs didn't love Chrono Trigger. So,
well, there is actually going to be a pretty big Chrono Trigger reference in Outlaw Empire.
No shit. Okay.
There's this character I cannot wait to write. I don't think he'll go over anyone's head who's played Chrono Trigger. The same way I have a character in Bloody Rose named Grudge, who's essentially like a Tonberry. At one point he has a lantern, at one point he has a giant butcher's knife, and he moves really slow, just like a Tonberry. So yeah, there'll be a good Chrono Trigger reference, hopefully, in Outlaw Empire. Great game, great soundtrack.
Frog is a character that can work in any fantasy book.
Oh, interesting. You should say that.
Oh, all right, outstanding. Can't wait. I didn't play Elden Ring. I know you have. I don't. I think it was it Dark Souls, the first From Software game that got real big. Here's my thing, guys: is I don't have very much time to play games. So when I do, I don't want them to piss me off. And games are just like overly hard just for the sake of being overly hard. I don't have time for that, and I don't need anything to make my blood pressure rise anymore. I've got kids. So yeah, I stay away from all that, even though Elden Ring looked and sounded like it was super, super awesome. But you know what I think would be really, really awesome is if they put difficulty settings on those games. So I know that makes them lose street cred stuff, but I think it would get.
Hey, they do have difficulty settings. It's called grinding.
No. I did my years of grinding on Final Fantasy 1 and 2. I've had enough.
Oh boy!
Forever. Yeah.
When you're having an all-fighter party and you got to get silver swords for the whole group, for all the boys. Yeah, that's a grind. Actually, my character in Final Fantasy Online, or the Final Fantasy 14, is named Astos, and he's literally a dark elf named after the dark elf in Final Fantasy 1, the one who's in the swamp who took the crown from or put the elf prince asleep. Do you remember that at all?
No, I've read too many.
Hey, nobody does, but yeah. But
I'll do that. I'll bring up some one random scene from like this made-for-TV fantasy movie that no one remembers except me, and I'll be like, "You can't remember that? I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I remember that movie I saw when I was 7." So
yeah, I'm kind of like you with Dark Souls. I mean, I do make a lot of time for video games, but I also don't want them to piss me off. And so Dark Souls, the first time I ever played it was I got a buddy who we do this thing every few years called bunkering, where we just bunker up for a few days and play a video game. And we play one that's difficult, like Elden Ring, or oh god, it was like the dungeon grind, Darkest Dungeon, where it's like it's brutally hard, but if you get frustrated, you can pass it off to a friend, and you can also enjoy watching your friend die over and over again. So it makes it a lot easier. And sometimes there's a boss you just can't do, and they might have a knack for it. So this summer, I haven't seen him for a couple of years because of COVID. He lives in Ottawa. He's like, "Can I come out for 2 weeks?" And I'm like, "That's an absurd amount of time for two 40-year-old men to hang out together and play video games." But yes, you can. Because at the end of that 2 weeks, I was moving in with my girlfriend for the first time. So we had the bunker of bunkers. And what do you know? Elden Ring was released this year. So that was our game. So we played the living shit out of it. And when he left, I was like, if I don't finish this now, I'll never finish it. So.
See, I knew I should have been a writer. That way I can just like play video games instead of
right. I mean, I think the productive writers don't, but yeah.
I think we're going to be divided on this one: Zelda or Final Fantasy. Gun to your head. I'm a Zelda guy through and through. I think
really? Yeah.
Franchising gaming.
Yeah, definitely Final Fantasy.
The new Zelda is coming out, and the thing is, I got my kids all addicted to Zelda now too. So now I realize this is the first time there's going to be a new Zelda release where I actually have to fight my kids for time to play it.
Ooh, that's going to be rough. It might
be kind of a double-edged sword there, but
yeah.
Well, because I would say like, okay, cool, we'll just play together. Except they can play for 16 hours straight. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And they'll do that. They'll be like, oh yeah, I'm on like the 7th temple, and I'm like, we were on Temple 1 yesterday.
Well, Christmas is coming. You could maybe get them a Switch for Christmas.
Well, he's got the Switch actually, so we're actually like, hey, we're gonna have to take your Switch and hook it up to the downstairs TV so we can all. Because when Breath of the Wild came out, I don't even think my second was born yet. The first one was like at that age where he'd go to bed at like 7 o'clock. So we were putting him to bed at like 7 o'clock. Yeah. My wife and I were playing until like 1 a.m. every night, even on work nights, because we were just so addicted to that game. So we're thinking we're going to end up doing the same thing with that one. I have not watched Arcane. Do you watch Arcane, League of Legends?
Yes, it's the greatest TV show of all time.
Wow. That's high praise. All right.
Yeah. No, so obviously to each their own. I thought it was amazing. I loved every second of it. I don't know a damn thing about League of Legends, but Arcane is a masterpiece. Even though you'll see when you watch it, it is damn good. And the last like 10 seconds of the show, I've probably watched the last 10 seconds like 30 times because I was like, who the fuck thought this up? In an age where so many things aren't the way you wish they were, Arcane nails every second of itself. It is just perfect.
Yeah, I get it recommended quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm real big about like I think anime is great if you guys love it. I don't really watch it, but they're like, oh, it's not actually anime. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's tough for me to watch animated stuff. Did watch Vinland Saga with my kid because I thought that he would like that a lot, and I'm addicted to Viking stuff. I'm not gonna lie there, but I don't know. Maybe someday. But with me, it's like I read so damn much. It's hard for me to watch anything. And if I do watch anything, it's stuff that me and my wife have on a backlog to watch. You know. So
yeah, I am a huge anime fan. But yeah, I wouldn't call it arcane anime at all because I think anime needs to be Japanese because of all its little idiosyncrasies. But
Castlevania count? I like Castlevania a lot.
No, definitely not. Like anime is its whole other breed. Like I saw a funny like quote about it once, and it's like every anime show's got like just some anime bullshit that if you're not into anime, you don't like it. But once you're into it, it's so funny, and there's a certain kind of sense of humor that's like a little twisted, a little dark, and a little perverted, often perverted. That you just got to get into. Like I watched this show called Food Wars, which is about people in a culinary school, and the end of every episode was the climax of them making like a cook-off against someone else, and it was fucking mind-blowing. It was so much better than almost any show I've ever seen, and I'm like, how am I addicted to this show where it's just about cooking, but they make it so good? But also the first 3 episodes, like people's clothes are blowing off, and you gotta get past that.
I did start getting really into manga because I just think that American comics have just went in the toilet. They're just unreadable now. Like all the stuff I grew up with, it's just unbearable what has happened to it. So, I started with like Berserk. Really, obviously, I love that. And Death Note, of course. I mean, starting with the big hitters here. And then Vinland Saga was just like everything I was looking for in a comic book.
Oh, great.
I really love Vinland
Saga. I've seen the anime, but I haven't read any manga, actually.
If you've seen the anime, you've seen it. It's literally like page for page. It's really good adaptation. I like it.
So have you heard of like Jujutsu Kaisen? At all?
No.
Jujutsu Kaisen was kind of like, I'd say one of the bigger shows of last year. And it definitely put, I mean, its anime studio was already on the map, but it like really put them on the map, so much so that they got a show called Chainsaw Man coming out that's like, I've been chomping at the bit for it for years.
I get that recommendation a lot for the manga.
So they do good work, and Jujutsu Kaisen's a pretty good show too.
So some of these questions here: any obscure sci-fi, fantasy, or horror books that you love? I guess obscure.
Yeah. Can you give me 1 second? I'm gonna go grab this book off my shelf to see what it is. 1 second.
I'll read some of these things while you look.
Never mind. I remembered it.
Oh,
so it's called Dim Stars. I can't recall the author's name right now, but it's called Dim Stars, and it was actually a self-published author sent it to me. It's a sci-fi book, and he sent it to me, and I get sent a few books like that, and usually I don't have time to read them. Sometimes I will. And this one, I read the first like couple pages of it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty funny and pretty clever and pretty well written. And then I put it away to read something else, but it kind of stuck in my head. And so I went back and read it again, and I blew through that book, and it was so funny. And it was very like, it's space, but it's, it doesn't take the laws of space seriously. It's like if Kings of the Wild was in space, it wouldn't take the laws of space seriously. It's just fun. It's a fun, funny adventure. It was just great. So it's called Dim Stars. But yeah, it's relatively obscure.
Google that, guys. Find out who it is.
Google it.
I keep hearing Sandman is good, but haven't tried it. Thoughts? I liked it a lot, but I love that comic. That comic, when I read it in high school, completely just like, it was the first non-superhero thing that I'd ever read in a comic book, so it completely blew me away when I read it. And I think that, was it a perfect adaptation? No. Was it way closer to the comic than I ever expected it to be? Absolutely. So I think it was one of those things where I just wanted it to be like watchable. I didn't want to watch it and be like, this isn't like what I read at all. And I think even with the changes they made, I still feel like, and there's a lot of stuff that it's like panel for panel adaptation. Mm-hmm. So that's what
great to hear.
People can't ever be happy with adaptation, because if it's just like the source, they're like, oh well, it needs to be different. Like when the director's cut of Watchmen by Zack Snyder,
Yeah.
Panel for freaking panel. And people are like, oh, you got to change it up some. I was like, if he had changed it, you guys would have attacked the hell out of the guy for that. So, I just, you get the hard. I think that readers are just the hardest audience.
They are tough to beat because you'll get and you can't blame someone if that's just the kind of person they are or that stage in their life where they want fidelity, true fidelity to the books. But I think just to be happier in general, I know it helped for me. Just if you can go into less things with expectations, the better. You're just gonna like everything more. Trust me. Like, boy, it took me a while to realize that. Because I remember going into the Lord of the Rings movies. I was young. I was like, full of spit and vinegar and been like, oh, they fucking better not change anything. Legolas better have blonde hair, you sons of bitches. That was like the only thing I really cared about. Because like I've seen some paintings where he had dark hair and I'm like, the fuck is going on here? That's not Legolas. And nowadays I wouldn't care. I wouldn't give a shit. But back then I really did. But yeah, the less expectations.
Different experiences with when I went into Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah,
I mean, up until like an hour into the movie, I was still convinced it was going to suck because a year before that, the Dungeons and Dragons movie came out. It was atrocious.
Yeah,
and that completely killed my enthusiasm. I thought they just can't make fantasy movies. They just can't do it. They can't figure it out. And it wasn't until Gandalf's fighting the Balrog where I'm just like in tears. Like, I can't believe they pulled it off. They've actually done this. Yeah. So I think we had different experiences there. So I spent like the last hour of the movie embarrassing my friends by crying like a little baby because of.
Want to hear a cool story about the Two Towers?
Sure.
So when I went and saw Two Towers, like everyone else, like a nerd at that age, I stood outside for hours to get into the theater.
Did you dress up like a hobbit or a wizard?
I did not dress up like a hobbit, but we got into the theater. It was opening night. And the show starts, and then somebody comes on, or the movie's about to start, and someone comes on, like the theater guy, and it's like, oh, we've got someone who wants to talk to you. And some people start yelling Gandalf, and I turn and look, and Ian McKellen's walking down the aisle of the movie theater and came to the front, and he was like, I missed the premiere in London, so I'm seeing this for the first time with you guys tonight. And he was sitting in the back of the theater. And then he goes, round of applause, obviously, and he goes back and sits down, and 5 minutes later, he's, falling down, fighting the Balrog. And it was just so friggin' awesome to watch that movie with him in the theater. It was so
cool. You got
to
watch the movie with Gandalf. That's
yeah.
That's hard to beat right there. Hey, did you see Brian Lee Durfee's top 10, which turned out to be, if you've ever watched Brian Lee Durfee's YouTube channel, he'll make top 10.
Yeah, I've seen some.
He'll start with like number 27. Like, anyway, in his top 40 greatest fantasy series, your book made the list. Which
I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, that's great. And we share a cover artist, so. I feel like anyone I share a cover artist with, I'm pretty much brothers and sisters with.
His books are really, really good. Very animated.
Richard Anderson, best of the best.
Yeah. He also put his own books on that list, by the way.
Well, fair. God, if I was going to make a top 40 fantasy series, I'd put my book at number. I think it's the best book ever written. To me,
Brian P. Rubin. Is this the Dim Star author? Does that sound right?
Yes, that is it. Brian P. Rubin. Yeah, and as you see, it's like hasn't got many Goodreads ratings, and anything I can do to pump that book up because it was really fun, funny. I would love to read more of them. It was a good book.
I saw that Dungeons and Dragons trailer, and I was convinced that was going to be awesome. I was like, that's a new age for fantasy. We're finally going to get good fantasy. It was a great trailer. It was. And the first 10 minutes, I'm like, is this bloopers? I was like, this is Jeremy Irons. This is the worst acting I've ever seen him do in his career. What is this? And it just got worse.
Have you seen the trailer for the new movie?
I have. I actually think it looks quite funny.
Yeah,
what that looks like is the cast got together, played a Dungeons and Dragons game, and said, no matter what happens, this is what we're putting in the movie. That's what it looks like to me. And I think that's how they should go. Because every time they try to make a serious Dungeons and Dragons movie, it don't work.
Exactly. So
have some fun. It looks to me like if Marvel Studios made a Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I think in that regard, I think is a great idea.
Yeah.
I also might just love Chris Pine. So
and owlbears.
Yeah. Have I seen Kroll? Oh my God. That's like asking me, do I like fantasy books? I've seen Kroll like a million times, man. What kid my age didn't grow up wanting that badass star in that movie? Come on. That's good stuff.
Yeah. I think I've only seen it once, but.
Well, you're young. You could watch it again.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, check this out. Madison went to see Return of the King with a guy in full Aragorn cosplay.
Oh, wow.
If you look like Viggo Mortensen, my wife would probably slap you for
that. No shit,
because I can't watch We watch that. We watch that 2 times a year, the trilogy with my kids and
Yeah.
wife. And yeah, I have to hear about how handsome Aragorn is pretty much the whole time.
He's a
Not wrong.
ruggedly handsome motherfucker. Yeah. I thought the guy in the new Rings of Power show in that last episode. Have you caught up with it?
Yeah, yeah. Wait.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you've seen the
4,
Numenor episode.
3. Yeah, yeah. I've seen
Yeah.
3.
There was a couple times with that guy, and I don't think that he's related to Aragorn, but he definitely, like, from the right angle, he looks
Halpern,
very
yeah.
much.
Me and my wife thought for sure that he was supposed to be Elendil at first because he looks like he could be. I think she called him great value Aragorn.
Yeah, because he's got that kind of, I don't know what is it about his face, wide set face or wide set eyes or something, but or like that, just that air of like, I don't know what it is, but yeah, he's getting some vibes, and I think as the show goes on, you may see more of that.
We got all kinds of theories about who that is. Like me and my wife are saying we think it's the Witch King, and my kid came out the other day and he said he thinks he's the King of the Dead, and I'm like, holy shit, that's actually a really good idea.
Oh, he could be. He could be. You know who I think's the Witch King? Is the kid. The kid of the elf and the girl with. I bet you that's going to be the Witch King of Angmar or something like that.
Well, if you watch the opening credits, they have like the little vibrating sand, and you see like the 9 circles. I'm like, so I bet this show is going to end up being about the nine kings, the 9 to become the Nazgul. I'm betting that's what the show is going to end up ultimately being about. So
yeah,
but I said, a show with Isildur in it, okay, that's a whole thing with the King of the Dead and him not coming to the Last Alliance. It's like that's actually a really good thing. So,
you're right.
I love that my kid's 10 years old and he's thinking of these things. I love it.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's when I'm like, okay, you haven't been a total failure as a parent.
Yeah, that's some good theory crafting there.
When your kids speculate about Lord of the Rings, it's really good stuff. Yes, John, Brian Lee Durfee's books are great. You need to get them ASAP. They're very, very good. And yes, they are very grimdark. Very, 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 very grimdark. So anything that you recommend that anybody reads that haven't read yet besides Kings of the Wild?
Well, Black Tongue Thief. I mean, I won't shut up about that book. I really, really, really like it. Yeah, I don't know. Jade City. Yeah, there's just tons of great stuff out there. God, I've trouble keeping up myself. I read that I saw that I was watching some of your. Oh yeah, nice.
You got so before somebody ruins the ending for you. What were you gonna say? You saw that I did what?
I was watching some of your other like interviews like this just to brush up on what was about, and saw that you don't normally like nautical fantasy.
Oh no,
right?
Man! It's Moby Dick PTSD. I was forced to read Moby Dick in high school. Couldn't stand it, but I love Treasure Island.
So have you heard of The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker?
I have the first 2. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's nautical fantasy, and RJ, I don't think he knows the first thing about sailing or boats, so he made sure it didn't matter, and he just writes a story with cool characters and very, very unique world building, and I think you might like it because it's not like overbearing on the ship stuff, but it's really good. He's just a great writer.
Yeah, I'm gonna be reading Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb in November, so I'm scared about that, but. Everyone assures me, well, you like Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Narnia, maybe. I think it'll be more like that. I think it's not really like they're telling me about like starboard and port side, and it's not nothing like that. I feel like when you get stuck on a boat with a crew, if you don't love that crew, you're not going to like the book because there aren't exactly people going to be swimming up out of the ocean and getting on the boat and being like a new character for you to like. So
yeah.
Maybe it's just me. I don't know. It seems like every time I'm reading a book now and they get stuck on a boat, it's just like
no, that's fair. Everyone's got things that they don't like about books. I tend to not so much nowadays. I haven't read many books like it, but I used to hate like the slog, like a bunch of people traveling through the wilderness together. I just got tired of it. I read it too much, and I was like, I read some series and I got to that part, and I was just like, nah. And then I wrote a book about it. So whoops.
Well, that's what I didn't like about the book 3 of Farseer by Robin Hobb, is it was just like so much. It's like walking and talking about hunting and then actually hunting and then talking about and then stopping and having some elf bark. It's like, oh my God, can we get on with the story? So that's just maybe to me. I'm tired of people walking through the snow forever.
Yeah, everyone's got their thing. I mean, God, sometimes I don't like TV shows and movies sometimes. This is a really weird thing not to like, but like organized crime, or not even organized crime, but like, what's the show about the biker gangs?
Sons of Anarchy.
Sons of Anarchy. Like I watched the first episode of that, and they're walking in a convenience store and they're like knocking chips off the shelf, and I'm like, fucking fry these guys in the electric chair. You can't knock chips off the fucking shelf in a convenience store. I don't care if you stopped a rapist at the end of your show. Fuck off with that noise. Lock these guys up. Lock them up.
I guess we all have that one thing.
So yeah, I was just like, I gotta like these characters. So sometimes me and organized crime just don't get along.
So here's Jake, the one that I was saying that recommends Guy Gavroche a lot.
Oh, right.
Maybe you guys should have a GGK talk. But
wise man.
I think Andrew was messaging me that I think that you guys are going to talk soon.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
He's a good dude. Very energetic. He actually makes me seem quite a sweep, which might not be wrong.
He read Kings of the Wild, and I think really liked it. So I'm looking forward to deep diving that with them.
So before we go, just want to kind of clear this up. So is it accurate that Kings of the Wild is 70s rock, Bloody Rose is 80s rock? Does that mean we're going to have 90s rock in the third book?
Just 90s music in general, yeah. So, and yeah, Bloody Rose is 80s, like kind of everything. Like each character in that book represents a genre as opposed to an instrument. So yeah, in Outlaw Empire, it's 90s. Very 90s inspired, and certain characters are more inspired by certain genres as well, but it won't be as like, I'm not cleaving to it the same way I did with Bloody Rose. But yeah, and it's hard to make a book funny, believe it or not, when all the music is angry as fuck.
Right.
With Kings of the Wild, it's easier because it's like, it's even that era is easier because it's all about adventure. Those bands were going on the road and having a good time and exploring a space that had never been explored before. And then with Bloody Rose, it's a bit more difficult because everyone is ego driven and they're trying to be bigger and louder and fucking crazier than the 70s. So if you were touring on the road, I've heard people being like, oh, I didn't really like Rose as a character. I thought she was hard to get along with or hard to like. And I'm like, if you were touring with Axl Rose, do you think you would have thought he was a swell guy?
Yeah, ask Metallica how they felt about touring with Axl Rose.
Yeah, so I understand that you've got to write compelling characters, and I hope I wrote some of those, but Rose was not meant to be one of those. And it's so hard on your sleeve. That 80s music was so like that. And so with 90s, it's very much like Rage Against the Machine is probably like the main one that I listen to all the time. Like, boy, the Renegades of Funk. If there was like an opening credits to that of the show, or that would be that.
Yeah, I read Dave Grohl's book earlier this year.
Oh yeah, me too.
Last year, and it just got me on like a crazy 90s alternative kick there for like 6 months. And it was
because he references a lot of bands I've never heard of, right?
What's that?
He references a ton of bands I've never heard of.
I don't listen to punk really, and he talks about a lot of punk bands and stuff like that. But like all of the 90s alternative, the flannel shirt wrapped around our waists and stuff. I was like, yeah, that was my high school years right there, So
so a good portion of it will obviously grunge is a huge part of that. Nirvana, stuff like that. Offspring, but they're grunge, but then also hip hop. Like, my God, I had never listened to full albums like Illmatic by Nas and stuff like that, or Only Built for Cuban Links, which is the most insane name for an album I've ever heard of. But all the Wu-Tang guys, and now I listen to them nonstop every day, all day for the last 4 years is hip hop and grunge. So hopefully there'll be a lot of that kind of references in there. There's tons of great, even if it's harder to make that stuff funnier. But it's very inspiring thematically because those people were they were pissed off. Both the grunge people in Seattle and the people living in Brooklyn, New York were pissed off and wanted to fight back. So
all right, cool. Now I hope that there's a reference to not having to use your AK in there now. So
there's going to be a lot of them. Let me tell you. Maybe even a Smash Mouth reference. Who knows?
Wow. All right. Walking on the Sun.
Yeah.
I can play every single note of some of these songs, guys. I can go through them. I can put the radio on mute and actually play the instruments with my mouth and stuff because I'm just that fun. It's my wife how that goes when we're watching movies I've seen a million times. And I like to quote everything about 3 seconds before they say on the TV drives are nuts. And I can look at it and say, yeah, that's annoying. Stop doing that. But I marriage, right, guys? Well,
I do the same thing.
I want to thank you for joining me tonight. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to do this again because, like I said, I
Oh,
felt
thank
like when we
you.
talked before, we kept trying to talk about everything except the books, you know. So I thought this would be a
Yeah.
perfect way to get that out. I'm sorry it took so long, but it sounds
Oh,
like
no worries. I
you really
appreciate the
love to play
opportunity.
video games anyway. So
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Yeah.
but whenever book 3, whenever you know get galleys of that, you know, if you're looking for, you know,
It'll happen. It'll happen.
you know, if you're looking for a blurb, you know, you might
Yeah.
know a guy. You
Oh,
might know.
good point. Yeah. Yeah. I'll see if I can use my, yeah.
Well, I'm excited that you're taking your time with it and getting it right. I hope that you are satisfied with it because I know that there's no tougher critic than ourselves, right? I mean,
Truly.
publishers might feel a little differently with that statement, but you know, with me, like, I'll look at one of my videos and I think it's like one of the worst things ever. And people are like, "You're too hard on yourself." I'm like, "Yeah, I am. I am really hard on myself. That's how I think I get better." But I can imagine as a writer, it's just like I would go
Yeah.
through
It
every
just depends.
sentence and be like, "No, that's not good enough." You know, so that's why I can never do it.
Yeah, 100%. And not to say my other books are perfect. I mean, I'm sure there's some sentences I change, but I can be very nitpicky about the number of syllables or the cadence of a sentence. And ultimately, what matters to me is not like necessarily like making money off this kind of stuff, although that definitely helps. But
Sure.
it's leaving a legacy behind is what I really wanted to do. It's what Guy Gabriel Kay inspired me to do in that book, and it's leaving something behind that you're proud of. And so that's what's most important to me.
Outstanding, outstanding. I think that's the best way to leave this off. So thank you again for joining me. And guys,
Yeah, thank
have
you,
a
everyone.
great night.